I'm Molly Kimball. Welcome to Fueled, a wellness and nutrition podcast. I'm a registered dietitian and nutrition journalist with a passion to help people live their strongest, healthiest life possible. In my weekly TV segments and columns, there's a limited amount of time and space to cover everything, but there's so much more to share. This podcast is my opportunity to dive deeper into the topics you want to know about. Today's episode is about all things biodynamic. And if you're not familiar with the term, you're not alone. It's something that's been around since the 1920s. It made its way here to the U.S. shortly after that in the 1930s. And it's spread across the United States, but it's not nearly as common as organic, but it's a lot more stringent and really focuses on more of a holistic approach. And the first time that I was really exposed to the concept and really kind of saw it and experienced it was when I was doing an interview with Lou Preston. He is the founder, farmer, everything with Preston Farm and Vineyards just outside of Healdsburg in Sonoma, California. And he has a winery. He also has a farm. And we went out to the farm, and he has a sheep, he has his olives, he has his grapes, and basically everything within that farm. The concept of biodynamic is that everything within that farm comes from within that farm. So everything from, the insects to with the fertilizers used to the natural pesticides or all these things, everything comes from within the farm. So we'll dive into that a little bit as well. So the concept of biodynamic is very far reaching. So I'll do my best to kind of sum it up, give you a general idea of what it is before we dive into our interview with our experts here. So in the United States, the term organic is regulated, but the concept of biodynamic isn't regulated. However, the principles of biodynamic are even more stringent than organic. So organic essentially means that a food is grown or raised without pesticides, synthetic pesticides, or additives, synthetic chemical type fertilizers. Biodynamic is similar in these fundamental principles to organic farming in that neither of them uses the synthetic chemicals, but biodynamic farming takes it much further, and it looks at the farm as an entirely self-contained and self-sustaining ecosystem, basically. So it also factors in things beyond just normal farming principles that we think of fertilizing and pesticides and things. It also factors in things like astrological influences, lunar cycles, so a very global approach to farming. Specific herbal and mineral preparations are also recommended to be used with biodynamic, and you'll hear about some of these. Composting is key in biodynamic, and livestock is encouraged to graze throughout the farm. So there's something called a Demeter Biodynamic trademark, Demeter being the name that you'll see on labels of certified biodynamic products. And this is a really rigorous certification process. So a lot of smaller farms choose to follow the biodynamic principles, but they're not certified biodynamic, but they're still abiding by, following, and really living by these guidelines. So biodynamic has really strict guidelines for things like soil fertility management, protecting the crops, animal welfare, and again, the use of very specific and specialized herbal and mineral preparations, especially for the soil. And these biodynamic principles also include a strong emphasis, like I mentioned earlier, that basically the easiest way, or I guess a way to try to explain it, is using the outputs of the farm. So what's produced or what comes from the farm, using this to put back in to nourish the farm. So everything that is put into the farm comes from within the farm. So from bugs to compost, everything comes from within the farm itself rather than being brought in from the outside. So recently, I mentioned Preston Farm and Vineyards in Healdsburg, California. It's one of my favorite places, by the way. If you haven't been there, go check it out. It's a really cool, they have a wine tasting room, but they've also got just a really cool, just a cool approach on the way that they do everything. They have a produce market that you can, it's kind of the honor system. Lou Preston is just an incredible person. So if you are in the Sonoma area, that is hands down my favorite winery to visit and favorite farm to visit. So anyway, we were back in Healdsburg recently though, and I had the opportunity to tour a farm called NewTree Farm. So the founder, Ed Newell, and the head of ranch operations, the farm manager, David Roundtree, and they also have several other partners. Andre is one who we also got to meet, but they have this gorgeous space of land that is just outside of Healdsburg. And they chose to treat this land with biodynamic principles and to care for it with these biodynamic principles. And they were incredibly generous with their time. And they spent the afternoon showing my husband and I around their farm. And they're about 3 years in, and they are very quick to acknowledge that they're still in the infancy stages of learning about biodynamic. But I'll share some of the highlights from our time with them on the farm in just a bit. It was really cool to see and talk with them about where they started, what the challenges were they had, and now the successes. And it's an incredibly rewarding experience that they've had to start with something that it really didn't even exist. And now they're creating just this gorgeous space and an infrastructure within the land that can depend on and support itself. So Ed and David are working with a biodynamic expert. His name is Harald Hoven, and they're working with him to educate them, train them, show them how to do all this, how to develop and live by these biodynamic principles. So in today's podcast, Harald shares his experiences, he shares his insight with us, and he has some guidance and suggestions on how we can incorporate these biodynamic principles into our own lives, into our own gardens, no matter how small the footprint. So after you hear Harald speak, first of all, I think he's absolutely fascinating. You'll never look at composting the same, I'll tell you that. So composting or decay, Harald explains why it's part of the magic of life, as he describes it, and that compost and decay is actually something to be appreciated as part of the beautiful process of life. But before we hear from my interview with Harald, I wanted to share some of the highlights from my time out on the farm at NewTree Ranch with Ed and David. So I found it just really interesting to see up close the experiences they're having, where they are just 3 years in. And again, they acknowledge they're super new to it, but they've learned a lot and they were happy to share a lot. So here are the highlights from our time out on the farm. So just a warning, it was also a very windy day. So you'll hear it, but I think you'll still get a lot from what they share.
I'm the CEO. My name is Ed Newell. I'm the CEO, founder, visionary of NewTree Ranch. The premise, the mission is to bring people into nature and kind of find a way. In 4 years, we've discovered who we are and been able to dive into ourselves and then also understand the land and bring people here to give them the same opportunity through different avenues. Some of those avenues would be like working in the farm, learning about farming, particularly biodynamics. Our mission is to bring people here and show them the connection that's happened for us with ourselves and with the land in the past 4 years, but try to do that in a much shorter time, which I think is possible. And some of the ways that we do that currently is with bringing them and having them learn about the farming practices of biodynamics. We use the Wim Hof method is a big thing we've been using on the ranch. It's a breathing technique for getting deeper inside yourself. Teaching cooking classes, particularly plant-based cooking classes, and having other talks about sustainability and sustainable living practices.
And then, David, what's your background and kind of how are y'all diving into this together? What's your role now, too?
Yeah. My name's David Roundtree. My role is ranch manager / farm manager. And this is NewTree Ranch. And I guess the whole concept of what we were doing was trying to find something more connected with ourselves. So 3.5 years ago, 4 years ago, I decided that he wanted to find a farm and find a place for a farm. And so we found this plot of land, and he found biodynamics. And then from there, we understood that it brought more of a spiritual connection and more of a connection to the cosmos. And so that's where we started. And so as we walk through, what we intertwined with the biodynamics is what our main concept is But then our second concept is companion planting. So originally, bringing in biodynamics, we really knew nothing, and it takes a lifetime of learning. I would say 2 years in the making of understanding biodynamics, about 3 years in the making of farming, and trying to understand the symmetry of yourself to the symmetry of the plants ends up being the most beautiful part. And then it all comes down into the roots of the soil. So biodynamics, I can lightly give you what biodynamics is a biodiversity of organisms. And the biodiversity is what is from the plot of land, and we try to contain that into one area by making sure that all of our nutrition, that all of our animals, all of our birds, that all of our poop and everything actually just only comes from this land. So we're about 90 to 95% there right now at about 3.5 years. So we actually grow and germinate all of our seeds. We started saving our seeds last year, and we have some second generation plants this year as well. So our first year, we ended up buying all of our plants. Our second year was when we started making all of our own plants. And what we did was we also brought in about 60 yards of amended loam, brought in about 60 yards of mushroom compost because we did not want to bring manure from outside properties. Okay. And we wanted to create our own. So thought maybe more organic matter was the best way to go about that. And that's when we started finding worms in our shovelfuls.
And so is that the primary fertilizer, is the worms, or what are the things that you use?
Our primary fertilizer is actually our plants and all the weeds in this area. So in composting, we always do a layer of carbon, which is straw, which we are getting from our land now. Then we do a layer of food, which is your nitrogen, and then more nitrogen from the actual manure. So you have...
And the manure is from the animals that are on?
Yes. So we have Nigerian dwarf goats, we have 22 chickens, and we have 2 Scottish Highlander cows right now.
David also shared his experience with what is referred to as companion planting.
So companion planting is a concept of where every plant next to every plant are really good friends and they have each other's back. So with this, we have Mirepoix Hill. So we're Ed and I are both chefs, and what we did was we wanted to make this garden more of a place for people that like to cook and learn to cook. And so Mirepoix Hill is your celery, carrots, and onion are your main ingredients for a lot of recipes. So you have your celery, carrots, and your onions. So then as I started looking into companion planting, I got this book by Helen Philbrick called Companion Planting. Harald Hoven recommended it to me. And next thing you know, I can find out that petunias actually protect all these plants in here. And then I found out that fennel protects all these plants in here.
So we've got petunias lining the perimeter.
Literally all around the whole perimeter. And so once we put this into the area last year, just with the companion planting, we eliminated, I would say, 80% of all the bugs in this farm.
And that's something that someone can do at home in their own garden.
Yes, it is. Okay. So that's creating the biodiversity. Mm-hmm. So they're creating nutrients for each other, and we're doing our crop rotations, and then we have plants that protect each other, so we don't have to add any pesticides at all into this area.
One of the things that we think about of educating our listeners is, okay, that's wonderful, and I'm hearing this, and I think the biodynamic concept is fantastic, but how can someone incorporate this right in their own yard? And so companion planting is something that anyone can do, and it just makes a lot of sense for us. And then, so Ed has walked over, and tell us what we've got here.
Shinto Kiwa cucumbers are Harald Hoven's variety. He brings everything back to the native state. So these are one of his that he is part of his farm from Raphael Gardens in Sacramento. Okay. And then we have ladyfinger carrots, and then we have orange nasturtiums.
And it's fantastic too because they also look so beautiful and interesting. And when you're putting these ingredients on a plate, it's immediately more special.
Yes. Yeah. Since last year, we actually have flavor in our vegetables. Right. We didn't have very much the first year, and so this is the concept of what we're learning is you can't have everything right away. So we're expecting to have all these vegetables the first year. We planted bunch of squash, a bunch of tomatoes. The tomatoes were falling over. The squash were barely coming in, maybe 8 squash per plant. And then, so we were like, no, not as flavorful at all, because we were working basically with clay and flagstone in this ground. So that's why we had to keep amending our soil. And so we're always asking each other, we're like, what are we doing wrong? What are we doing wrong?
And at this point, you think we're doing everything right so
Yes.
far. We're doing it the right way. And
yeah. And then so Harald comes in, he's like, you guys need to be patient. Let's build a compost pile. And we're like, well, what are we going to do about the land? He's like, no, let's build a compost pile. I'm going to teach you about compost. And that's when he started teaching us about the layers and the different nutrition that it brings in there. He said, if you wait another year, you're going to bring all your nutrition that was from your land back into your land again.
So explain the compost pile and kind of how that works. And where is it?
So we have all of our compost down there. Okay. So we have probably used maybe about 4 of them so far. And so I think what I was telling you is the carbon comes from your straw. Let's see, what would you call it at the end of the year when you get rid of all your vegetables at the end of the year? So we took everything, all of our plants that we pulled. We took a big harvest from the apples from the apple orchard, and we literally piled everything from our land this year. And this is your most beautiful compost that you can have.
Wow.
And you'll see we have a bunch of the worms in there too if I keep digging. But this really should be it should be spongy.
I can't imagine that 4 years ago I would have never imagined putting my hands into manure and being so excited by the way it felt.
This is perfect.
Yeah, it's definitely been a big change for all of us. There's a personal side to it, and there's the farm side, and they kind of come together for me. I would say about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I started to look at our farm and see how vibrant and happy and healthy it was, even though it was built on the wrong side of a mountain and in the shade all winter long. It started to have the system that worked really well together, and my neighbors didn't have the same success. And the only thing that I could see was that their farms were sick and that they were bringing in a lot of pesticides and not letting an environment do what it naturally does. And I started to think how I could apply that to my own body and myself, and started to eliminate any kind of medications and things out of my life, and watched my body do the same thing that my farm did and start to thrive by taking toxicities and all sorts of things, and face products and household cleaners and your food, and get rid of them in our lives. And we've really understood. I think when we first came here, we were building a farm and a bed and breakfast to teach people where their food came from, and we had to learn first. And we expected to have paying guests 3 years ago, and our first paying guests are this year. And I think that was because how were we going to tell people where the food came? We may have been chefs, we may have worked in my parents' garden when I was a kid, but I didn't know anything about what it meant to farm naturally. And Biodynamics has really taught us that. We wouldn't have learned that from our organics. Biodynamics forces you to bring the animals in, bond with the animals, bond with the plants, understand what's happening with the plants and why it's happening with the plants, and how you relate to that. And I don't think I could explain that to anyone any more than they could have explained it to me 3 years ago. It's something you have to kind of live. So it comes together. It's like a mirror of you. When you're working on your land, you're seeing yourself, and you have to work on yourself in order to correctly be able to work with the land.
And now switching gears so we can hear from the expert himself, who Ed and David have learned from. So we're excited to be joined by Harald Hoven. He is founder and director of Raphael Garden at Rudolph Steiner College in Fair Oaks, California. And he has decades of experience in biodynamic farming and an expertise and passion in biodynamics that is incredibly inspiring, and I think we'll all learn a lot from. So welcome, Harald. I'm excited to talk with you. I've heard so much about you, and I'm honored to have you on the line with us.
Hi, Molly. Glad to be with you. So I can tell you that I had a hard time in school being dyslexic, And so the sort of academic career was not good for me, but that I have been a keen observer and learned very much from nature directly. So I have had the good luck of working with the living world and learning directly from her. And that gave me, in a way, allowed me to, well, get a certain amount of wisdom just from nature versus out of books. And normally I don't like to talk about things that I don't know myself, that I have not experienced. So I practiced, though, for here in the United States for 35 years and had 4 years before of training. Actually, I'm now more than 40 years since I've gotten introduced to biodynamics. And I have worked intimately with the land and experiencing the change from sort of something that you put together where you put things that don't belong into a farm where all the parts, if you will, speak to each other. That means they're related and they get along with each other and they're productive. And so this is a different language than what you normally hear, but it's true. It's true. And so now, after my more than 30 years of working with this on this one piece of land, now I take this onto the road and teach others. I give workshops. I work a lot in China and Taiwan and do consulting with different organizations such as NewTree Ranch. Take the fruits of my work wherever it's needed, because I've been farming for 35 years and 30 years in one location. And of course, you learn a great deal just living with the land, and it kind of grows on you what happens. I think that's also good to get a picture of really the farm as an organism, an individual organism, that every one of them should be somewhat different. What happens when you, get to know that? And what it means then for people to eat food that come from a place that is really, if you will, authentic, belongs. Yeah, this whole aspect is very important for me. What is authentic food? That means, is it produced in a factory, sort of, where you just bring the different resources together? Or is it something that's formed from the area where it's from? Anyway, that's kind of a focus of my work.
I like all of that. So let's, there's so much that we want to dive into. I think first, for listeners who might not be familiar with biodynamic, how do you explain it? And, I think a lot of people would see biodynamic and they would think, well, does that mean organic? So how do you even explain it to someone who has no idea?
Okay, good. Yeah, first of all, it was introduced in 1924. Farmers asked the Austrian scientist and philosopher Rudolf Steiner for advice, and he gave them a course of 8 lectures, and out of that grew the method of what's now called biodynamics. That means bios, life, and dynamics is forces. So it's what's living, it's kind of organic, but also what are the forces that are in the food, in the land. So it was started then and then spread pretty much all over. This practice in just most parts of the world by now. And it's based really on a different view than what we currently have, which is going down sort of through the microscope and looking at the cell level, and then from there explaining the world. In biodynamics, Rudolf Steiner begins with looking at really what's the surrounding where the food is grown, not just directly on the ground, but how does it relate to the planetary sphere? What's the moon doing? What are the other planets doing? And how is that influence the plant growth? And then further, Rudolf Steiner suggested that a farm should be really, as much as possible, self-supportive. It means that we don't just buy whatever organic ingredients, but rather that we try to produce them on the farm, growing green manure, making compost, in my case also growing seeds. So we have something that has a relationship to where we are farming. And then very importantly too, to add to this general good practice using special preparations that are made of fermented cow manure and fermented quartz crystals that are used homeopathically as sprays, and other fermented herbs that are added to the compost to improve actually the value of the compost, bring more trace elements to it, and more resilience to the plant that grow in this compost, in the soil.
And one of the ways that I've explained it in just a very simple way, and you can correct me if this is not how I should be saying it, but that biodynamic practices, everything that goes into the land is from the land. So the bugs, the manure, as you said, everything is generated from the land itself. But it takes a while for that to happen because it doesn't, in many cases, happen overnight. So,
that's right.
When did you mention? So Rudolf Steiner had a series of 8 courses, and these 8 courses really had an impact on people. I mean, did he do it multiple times over and over, or was it a one time?
No. Actually, it was just shortly before his death. He had been asked for a while, and then finally was able to do it just 3 months before he was, had to stay in bed and was actually coming close to the end of his life.
What an impact he was able to have with that. That's incredible.
Well, yes. And it was great that he could do it. He had introduced other things before, like this special method of education, what we call Waldorf education or Steiner education, which had a big great impact, or medicine, different form of practicing medicine. And so the farmers asked him, please help us too. And he was so busy, he couldn't do it, but he finally managed.
Wow.
And then these farmers had to try what he was bringing in these lectures to see, can we make this into a method that can be explained? And then they had to be careful too, because just imagine the early 20s, the chemical industry had just begun producing nitrogen fertilizers. Yeah, so chemical fertilizer that is not from nature. And so now somebody's talking about ways how you could, get around using those. That was a threat. And so the biodynamic preparations got numbers instead of that they were talked about openly. So there's 500 for the manure preparation, or 501 for the silica. And for the compost preparation, 502 to 507. So they got numbers so that they didn't need to talk about them openly because it was dangerous.
Well, then it also sounds like it's just another chemical when you call it by a number. It sounds much more
and it was it was a little neutral, and because they didn't want to talk about it openly out of fear that it could be misused or relabeled or.
So when we look at biodynamics as a whole, to help our listeners kind of wrap their head around it, it's a holistic approach, an ethical approach to farming in particular, but food and nutrition also. What are some examples, like how, I guess, because it seems very broad for someone. So if you kind of, give an example of a farm that maybe has the produce, the animals, what all goes into that for natural pest control, fertilizer? How does this all work within a system of itself?
Okay. So we have to realize that in nature, things take care of themselves. There are pests at certain times because of environmental factors. Yeah, so it's too wet, plant grows too much. I can see here in my neighborhood right now, there's one particular plant where it had too much water, so a bug comes, and takes a little bit of that life away. So that always happens in nature. However, the more balanced the soil is, the more, if you will, buffering you have through a good soil that is rich, has enough organic matter, enough humus, the better the plants will grow. That's the foundation. And then you'll have, from the start, less problem. So when you begin a biodynamic farm, in the beginning, you will have still problems. You will have to bring in materials from the outside. You don't have everything. You can't just rely on making compost from the land. That comes over time. So so we have to understand it that in the beginning, it's almost like the land needs medicine,
Right.
which is the humus, the good soil, rich organic matter. And then over time, you have that on the land and you need to add very little. So you have already there through this, you have already a good foundation. However, there's always bugs that can come, or fungus that can come dependent on the conditions, environmental conditions. The more diversified the farm or the garden is, the more buffering, the more resilience you have. That one thing takes care of another. The more monoculturalist it is, the more problems are likely. That means the farm tries to have a lot of different things, and it's not just relying on one crop and buys all the equipment just for this one crop, but rather tries to have multiple crops where one supports the other. That makes a big difference.
And
there could still be problems, but then there are lesser. Yeah.
And is this similar? Ed was talking to us about the companion planting, and so can you kind of explain that to our listeners?
Yes. So that certain people that you get along with well and others not, right? Well, it's similar with plants, and they're just compatible or really well compatible, and they are in a way helping each other to be better. And others that are just not a match. And so by knowing this, so that's in companion planting, you put those together that really support each other in a particular way, and then you have healthier crops.
And what are some examples of best friends?
For instance, good example is actually the family of the onion and leeks and garlic. They love members of the celery or carrot family. And normally in almost any combination, they love each other, they are good to each other. And that problem that one could have is helped by the other and vice versa.
What are some of the types of problems they would have that one would help balance out?
I remember in Germany we had a particular problem. We grew more root celery, celeriac. And that can get a particular fungus. Now, the leek, on the other hand, is kind of, more goes in the direction of garlic too. That's very much cleansing. That would make sure that the celeriac wouldn't get this fungus. On the other hand, the celeriac would help the leek in its growth. So they both stayed more healthy, and so that was why we would always plant them alternating rows.
And are there some where planting one type of plant next to another might help with pest control or something like that?
Could be two as well. Yes. So, for instance, there's the cabbage moth. That it's a white butterfly that flies to the cabbage and could bring problems. People in the past would grow hemp. Well, now I think we can do it again. It's legal again. That hemp will kind of, the smell of the hemp will not be pleasant for this caterpillar of the butterfly. And so you won't have the caterpillar in your cabbage.
And so, as you said, when someone is starting with a biodynamic farm, we might be starting with something that's quite frankly a mess, and we can't expect it to survive on its own. So we do have to bring in things from the outside, and that might include certain types of manure or other types of. What are some of the things that someone would start to bring in, and where can someone find these in like kind of everyday towns, cities? What are the resources for people to even start?
Okay. Now, of course, the soil is the most important to start with. And if you have a bigger piece of land, you can simply grow something that will be good for the soil. We call those green manure or cover crop. And that would be, say, something that contains nitrogen-fixing plants such as clover or other bigger ones. There are different types, and maybe grasses. I'd like to combine those two. That's one example. After having planted that, the soil will be already better and will, so to say, give you one free crop, and then maybe you do another one, green manure. That's one example. But very often also people begin with compost, maybe buying compost. That is, there's a lot of stuff out there that is not worth it. And it's called organic compost, and it's not properly composted. And it's still smelly. You smell the ammonia in it. There is some biodynamic compost now, at least here in California. It's called Malibu compost.
Of course, right.
Yes, maybe it was started somewhere there, even though you don't exactly have much animals there or dairy animals.
Right.
And but actually, otherwise, just to go somewhere where there's a riding stable to get some horse manure, and then make a pile with it, let it age. So you have a foundation. So I had to start that way too. I didn't have enough in the beginning. I brought in a lot. But then over time, it became more and more. The soil became so much better. And then I needed to hardly bring anything else in. And then I also started having, sheep and cow and chickens. So it really is steps. It takes steps. And I would say, though, you don't need to bring everything in. So people sometimes buy ladybugs. Well, if you have aphids, the ladybugs will find you.
Mm-hmm.
So
what was it you said? If you have what?
Aphids. That's a little kind of a black little or dark insect, tiny little insect that suck on plants. For instance, you have it in roses. They grow, and then close to the flower, you have this little sucking insect. And but when you have them, the ladybugs will fly in. They come and they lay their eggs, and then gradually they create a balance. So a lot of things will be taken care of in nature. However, when you start a garden and there's nothing, it was just more or less concrete before underneath or whatever, you may need to start with some earthworms or compost worms. In time, you'll have plenty of that.
And
so
is
in the
this
beginning, it always takes a little more.
Is this something that you would encourage, if someone is even in the city or the suburbs, that even no matter how large or how small their space is, that they could incorporate some of these practices?
Yes, definitely. And what I would always encourage people to do is to make compost, even if it's very little. And even if it is with worms, it's called vermiculture. You just have a little bin and poke holes in it, and they live in there. And you can Google it, find easy recipes how to feed them. And there, of course, you would need some worms. The reason why I propose this is that the magic of life, you can't see in a better way than really seeing a compost pile, because you see the magic of decay, of what's useless, into something that is so the farmer's or gardener's gold. And to see this, and to see just the aspect of time transforming something useless into really building the future is just such a teacher. And so I always recommend that to people, for people to do, to try to participate in nature, and that we're not just sort of, victims in what happens out there, and we throw everything in the garbage where it doesn't do any good, but rather that we make compost. And with that little bit that we have, we can have at least plants in the balcony, or have little potted plants, whatever. But it makes a difference. And I think people appreciate life differently by doing that. And that appreciation is what nature needs from us.
I want to listen to that statement you just said over and over again, because I do think it's a fantastic way, because we think of decay as a horrible, dreadful thing. There's nothing good about it, but you're seeing the beauty in this, and that it's bringing life.
Right. And it stinks first. It's just, there's always smell in what digests, but even there we can make it better. I would add a little bit of lime, some calcium or wood ash or whatever, that will hold the smell together, and that the pile becomes really a digestive organ for the garden, for the farm. And that is really, the life is contained and it's held together in this pile, and then after a while, you let it sit. Ed probably showed you the compost piles, right?
Yes. He was very proud of the compost pile, but they didn't achieve beautiful compost in the beginning. It was, so he's very proud of where they are now. And it was fascinating. And in fact, he had me stick my hand in it and squeeze it and feel how fabulous the compost felt.
Right. And then the young compost, it was maybe 120, 140 degrees warm.
Right.
And so you see this digestion. So that's very important that we really have a new appreciation, new understanding of life, that life is always transformation. And then that only out of that new life begins. And so now at NewTree Farm, there they use that compost also for starting the seedlings. And in time, they would have seedlings from their own operation. So you see then over time, they can say, this is really authentic, this is native. And then it has a different meaning than if you buy the seeds, you buy the fertilizer, you buy everything, and then you kind of put it on the land, sort of plug it in, so to say, and then finally get the product and start all over again.
Yeah, it was fascinating to see them on the front end of it. And while they're several years in, they acknowledge that they're still very new to this, and they learn so much every day. And there's such a excitement because what seemed once impossible to them, they're seeing it now. Actually, the difference that the purity, the health of the soil makes, and all the flavor, the color, everything of what they're growing too.
Right.
How did you get into biodynamic, and what's your personal experience?
Yes, so I grew up in the countryside, and post-war Germany, my mother would grow all the food for the family, and that was her escape from the house. She would go there and have some peace for a while. And
I would offer to help her. She's like, no, I don't need any help.
And then later, eventually, she started actually even a small commercial operation. And I saw that and I thought, wow, cool. And I wanted to do something that made sense. And so then I apprenticed in Germany for 4 years, and then came with my American wife, who I met there in Germany. Then we came here to California, and I joined a medical practice that was interested in growing herbs for making medicine.
What year was this?
And that was here in 83.
Okay.
And so we joined that. And then from there, I moved on to the land of Rudolf Steiner College, which is a teacher training center for the Waldorf School movement. And there then I also began teaching the students and then the general public. And I trained apprentices in horticulture and grew on small amount of land, really an abundance of food. So I had about an acre, and every year I would grow more than 10 tons of produce.
Wow.
And changed the way of marketing in the very early 90s to what's called community-supported agriculture. And that is a method where people buy into the harvest, so to say. They buy a share of the land, and then they receive everything that can be grown.
And a lot of times people may see that as a CSA or a CSA box.
Right, exactly. And that is a new model, because when you are a member, it's more like I go to the garden and see what's there, and not, I want to have that recipe, so I have this food. I want to buy this meal, prepare this meal, and so now I go shopping exactly these ingredients. And instead, then you learn, the season brings these kind of foods. In the winter, it's more on the cold crops, so, the broccoli, the cabbage, and the kale, and so on. And in the summer, you have more the heat-loving plants, tomatoes, pepper, eggplants, beans, squash, and so on. So there's different things in different seasons, and people learn then to live with the season, which is a very healthy thing.
And letting that determine what we prepare versus the recipe that we find online determine.
Right. But the key is to find a way of really working with what you have. And then for me also that includes making these special preparations. I've always made them here, and then together also with our Northern California Biodynamic Association. One can buy these preparations from a center, Josephine Porter Institute in Virginia. But otherwise, ideally, the farm is so, if you will, individualized that you even have these preparations on your land, if you have enough land or have enough different activities.
And there's a really great website. It's biodynamics.com. And they also have a lot of information about how to do compost and how to create many of these. And then they also have resources of where to find them. So it kind of gives someone some of the ideas. And what when we look at the benefits, how do you explain the benefits of biodynamic from like environment to economic to even the nutritional benefits that we get from biodynamically farmed produce or animals?
Yes. So I would say it's just about the best you can do for your land, doing it that way. It does require more of you. You have to pay attention to more things that most farmers do. But you can, if you become good at it, and you find the people who buy your products and who are willing to pay more than what it takes to grow the food, you can definitely make it. But it is, I would say, the CSA movement, Community Supported Agriculture movement, grew out of biodynamics. And so the people there have this direct connection, and that helps them to have a market where people just know, they eat the food and say, wow. And so I can be connected to the land, where it's coming from. And so it builds just by being close to it, that people can come visit the farm. That helps than just taking something off the shelf.
And it's a win-win because the people who are buying the CSA box may not have the time or want to make the time to do it, but they want to put these foods into their body and nourish their bodies with that. And then it gives someone is buying these from the farmer who's putting this time and energy into it.
Right. Because it's both. It's good for both. It's good for their individual nutrition, but also for the land, so that we can feel good about our eating habits.
When we look at environment, and of course it's, a huge or complete reduction in synthetic pesticides, fertilizers, all the chemicals used. So I think that there's no question when we look at the environmental benefit, there's absolutely no question that a biodynamic approach is going to be better. And then also, again, community and the personal enrichment that someone and the satisfaction that someone like Ed is getting from seeing this unfold right here on his land and because of his work to help it. What about the nutritional changes? Have you seen anything? It makes sense that if we have soil that is richer in nutrients, then our produce, of course, is richer in nutrients. But have you seen anything that shows us that of the difference with biodynamic?
Well, I mean, I have experienced it in my own life because I had mostly nutrition from the farm. And I would say a sense of well-being that is grounded is key, and that certainly I have had. And there's different studies. Now, you could say, I think what's important, for instance, is trace elements. The availability of trace elements from the ground for the crops. And that is a thing that's not, I don't think it's actually looked at a great deal because it costs quite a bit too to study, to do the test of the different elements. But I would imagine, and I don't have full proof, that biodynamic food has a lot more of it, in part through the preparations, actually these herbal preparations that we use for the compost, or that we can also spray on the land. I'm positive that biodynamic food has more of it, even though I don't know a particular study.
I am too. And when you even just look at the flavor, the color, it's completely different. It's vastly different than especially something that is conventionally raised. I think that something like biodynamic is still a relatively new concept. And when things are relatively new or relatively less widespread, and then so it's just not on the radar that we're going to have big funding for big studies on it. But I think common sense tells us that richer soil richer in nutrients, is going to translate to richer nutrient produce. And looking at biodynamic as a lifestyle of these practices, whereas organic is farming practices, biodynamic is a lifestyle.
Maybe I should say a little bit to that so that you understand too. You see, organic is also very widespread, or rather it has a wide base. So what's different between organic and biodynamic is that organic has a list of allowed substances or not allowed substances. So back then you can always just go shopping and you buy them and you don't look at, does it come from my land? And so it depends. There are organic farmers who mostly use what comes from the land. So, and that's great. I would say wherever farmers can manage. And so if you go to the farmer's market and you ask about farming practices, you can see then too, what do they use? Do they need to buy in a lot of things? Yeah. What do they do to have the things from the land? Do they have animals and so they provide manure? Do they need to buy in feed, or how do they deal with the needs of the land? And so there are big difference. It's a range, and so organic can be, there's some operations that are certified organic and they shouldn't be, like hydroponics, for instance, today. That's used in a lot of the berries, and it should not. It's a big rift now in the organic movement because this was allowed. And there are confinement operations, animal confinement operations that are organic. It's a crime.
Why is the hydroponic controversial?
Okay, so you see, the whole thing about organic is that you create a soil and that you work with the soil and you make it healthier. Hydroponics does not rely on anything. You use something like a neutral material and you put the organic nutrients through the water. And so you can easily keep the plants healthy, but it's total management. It's the absolute, I don't know what I should call it, control. But that's not nature. The more you know where things are coming from, the better. I want to say a little more also about products.
Okay.
Biodynamics, the biodynamic products are available under the Demeter label. Demeter is the international label for biodynamic products. And that can be anything. Yeah, it can be, when you're in Germany and where I apprenticed, it was heaven to go into the the pantry to see what they had. Everything could be Demeter certified. It's hard to find enough materials here at this point. It's getting better. At this point, Whole Foods maybe has the most, and it's still not much. Where you really find a lot of biodynamic products is wine. There's a lot of biodynamic wine.
Exactly right. That's where I think a lot of people have first seen the word. Right.
Because they have a high value product, and they want to make sure that you taste it. They want to make sure that you see that you get this terroir, the special character of the place. So that is so there you can see it. Not all of them are biodynamic certified, are Demeter certified, but that's at least for people to know. They could check and see where can I get Demeter quality, this or that.
And a lot of places may use biodynamic processes, but they are not certified. But that doesn't mean it's bad. They just haven't gone through that process. So like you said, if you're at a farmer's market, talking with the farmer about their processes will help you understand it, even if they don't have that specific certification.
Yes, but you will find few that are that work with biodynamics that are either they get certified or they can tell you that they are. If it's small, they can sell. If they are sort of local only, they can sell without being certified. Anything that goes over, I think, state line, cross a state line, normally the Demeter Association then will ask you to get certified, because
if you're going to say that it's biodynamic.
Yeah, because you could say, it's biodynamic, and it's not at all.
Charge a premium.
I thought that was right. Yes.
I have to say, China to me is shocking that there's an interest there. And are you able to tell us a little bit about that, or is there certain organizations that are bringing you in there? Or
no, yeah. Of course, it's always organizations, and what happens to be there, and as well as in Taiwan, it's the Waldorf School movement.
Mm-hmm.
So since I was here at the Teacher Training Center for Waldorf teachers, so people would come, and then later said, "Oh, come visit, come to Taiwan," and then so I would. So through these connections, first of all. But the Chinese know well, I mean, the people who are, who pay attention, how bad things are, how bad it is with environmental degradation, and how much better practices are needed. The Chinese tend to think, though, that it can be fixed very quickly. And they want to do the best, but it takes work. So I'm just getting through 2 years of special training of over 4 modules in China in one place, and I will do more. It's work, and in a way, to be successful, I need to be there enough to help people
and to help them slow down. And I think that China, like so many of us, it's all about efficiency. How much can we do in how little time and space? And so to learn to slow down and to actually listen and pay attention to the things around us and dial in and see how they're responding to what we're doing. And a lot of times we don't. We continue to kind of force them into the little spaces that we've put them in and can't understand why it's not working.
Right, yes, and so it requires a love, enthusiasm, fire to go that direction, and that they don't get, quickly, didn't work, next thing. And so what I do with people too is we do plant observation. So we use these herbal herbs for making these preparations that are important for the soil. And so they don't all grow everywhere. And so we have to look then, what do we have there? What could be used or what is similar? And so I do plant observation. That is a great skill then for people to learn to really see what is it, what makes a plant go one way or another. And so that can be help. And what I have to try to do is fire them up enough that they can be then on their own, because they have to have enough fire in them that they want to do it, and that they observe enough and see them making progress.
And they believe in it.
Well, yeah. Well, they have to look, though. They have to look. And if they say, I started telling you earlier about compost. When you see the compost and you see the change, you say, wow. And I never knew this is happening. This is happening everywhere in nature, kind of directly at the surface of the ground, but I make it into a pile or whatever. And then you're with it. But if you don't know, it's just everything is just numbers or whatever. Formulas.
Right. And this is the opposite of numbers, formula, productivity. When you started working with them in China, I'm just curious, were there things that were completely unfamiliar to you that you had not experienced, whether it's certain plants or insects or things that you didn't know kind of what their friends were or what their enemies were to plant next to them?
I have not worked closely enough with farmers there or long enough. I have done mostly teaching and not consulting. But I see certain things, of course, that are different. But I haven't seen enough practices. So one practice of old in China is human manure. And that means night soil, different names. That's an old practice in China.
What did you call it?
Human manure. That means poop.
Like human poop?
Right. Okay. And
it's called human manure, like they merged the words.
Right. But it's actually it's problematic too. Of course, you have to work very carefully, and we in biodynamics we don't promote it because we say actually what we have eaten, when we eat food, we take everything that's valuable in terms of, well, for our spirit, we take out of the food. And what we leave behind is, well, something that still has certain chemicals in it, but it's void of spirit. And so we say, well, not exactly for food production. But they have a tradition of that. And some people think good, and we tend to think, well, how can I contribute? And wouldn't it be great if I gave my leftovers to the land? In a certain way, yes, one can understand why I would say, okay, for growing fiber plants also, or methane, for producing methane, but we don't necessarily promote that as a way of collecting more. That's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen, though, in India, more ways, incredible ways how they work with products of the cow. And that's ancient, the ancient methods of using a lot of different cow products, the manure, the urine, the milk, the different things, all, there's a lot of wisdom. I have not found the same thing in China. Even though what's different there is they have 5 elements. So we have the classical Greek elements, water, earth, water, air, and fire, and they have 5 elements. And there are certain things culturally that are very different, and it takes a while to see how to talk with people.
I could imagine that's a big challenge, and I think it's incredible that they have this interest and that you're working with them and that they're open to that. So I think as we're kind of wrapping up and people are listening to it, okay, looking for biodynamic, if you can find it in stores, talking with your local farmers about their practices, seeking out those that are using at least largely biodynamic, if not all. And then finally, I think the things that the home gardener can start to think about, the sourcing of fertilizer, of how they're controlling their pests, of the companion type planting, thinking and looking at what does the land want to have there versus what are we forcing into it and what's responding well. Any other tips that you would say or kind of advice for people who are kind of more the urban folks who've got that small plot in their side yard or backyard or rooftop?
Yeah. This is definitely very good, just that people do a little bit. And, you can't be fully and properly biodynamic right away. And that's fine. And even when you go to the farmer's market, if you find farmers who mostly use material from their land, that's already good. And not only, all fertilizer, because that's, it's better if farmers say, I use green manure. It means they grew something on the land that made the land richer in organic matter, and then they grow a crop. That's already better. I would recommend also that people maybe look up the Biodynamic Association and then go do online, their webinars, go to a conference this fall. The national conference is going to be in Lake George, New York, November 20th to 24th, and people can look that up on the Biodynamic Association website. And it's helpful to find others who have an interest in this too, because it's hard to do it all your own. Maybe read something more, find some literature. People should just try. And, we all have the ability to do something. And even if we first feel it's not right, and patience and looking, and then also if it doesn't work, what went wrong? Can you see? Plant dried out, plant suffocated from too much water or whatever. Just paying attention, that's the key. And then, it will work.
I really appreciate you taking the time with us.
So if people want to invite me for doing something in their home or whether in their community, I'll go there. Yeah, so I mean, the information should be there. Maybe through you. I don't want to get too much.
No, I want to hear about that. We can dive into that.
Because I do travel because I wanted to grow. So if people find they have a group of, backyard gardener, farmer, whatever, I'll travel. I can do that now. I'm no longer tied down with the farm.
And that's largely what you've done with Ed with NewTree Ranch is going there. I believe they said you go there monthly and you provide that guidance, and they'll feel very frustrated. And then you can come in and say, well, here's what the problem is. And here's some things that we could look at, some solutions, or kind of educating them on not just telling them what the problem is, but helping them to learn how to identify it in the future. Okay. Well, fantastic. All right. And then I always include my website and my email in here. So if anybody does have a question or wants to get in touch with Harald specifically, you guys can reach out to me directly as well. So, all right, Harald, thank you so much. And I really appreciate you spending the time.
It was a great pleasure.
Thank you. As we mentioned, we're posting the links to the sites that Harald referenced in our talk today, and also the website link that has more information about Harald and what he does, what he offers. I'll also link to Preston Farms and NewTree Ranch so you can see the really cool things that these guys are doing. And as Harald and I talked about, there is very little published research about the benefits of biodynamic farming. But just because there isn't peer-reviewed published research, I feel that there's no doubt that it's an approach that's certainly better for the environment. It's better for our community. It's better for the soil, which ultimately means that it's better for us. So we are incredibly grateful to Harald for joining us today, for Ed and David for their generosity to show us the farm, and I hope you enjoyed our conversations as much as I did. I'm Molly Kimball, and you've been listening to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, the podcast. If you would like more Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, please head over to mollykimball.com, and you can follow me, Molly Kimball RD, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And join us next week for another dose of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition. Thanks for listening, and stay focused on living your strongest, healthiest life possible.